Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Got a few minutes before hopping onto this call, so I wanted to go live. I'm on Facebook and I'm on IG. So if you see me looking down while you're on Facebook, that's why. I wanted to talk very quickly about how to have healthy relationships. Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't joined the text community, be sure to do so. I just got a message. Thanks for the encouraging text. We have a private text community. And I will be sure to leave a link. If you're on Facebook, I'll be sure to leave a link for that to my, let me see, I'll leave a comment. Yeah, join the text community. Just text me, hi TJ, and you'll hear from me about once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times, but just giving you, whether God's speaking something to me or whether, I've got something private to share. I send it out to that community. We've got almost 100 people now. We've been doing that for about, I want to say a month. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but would love to see you guys and connect with you over that platform. So if you're on IG, you guys can use the link in my bio. Just hit text me. If you're on Facebook, you can look in the comments and you can text me there. It's good to see everybody. Talking about how to have healthy relationships today. What's going on, Becky? Talking about the idea of healthy relationships, the starting point of relationships. I want to talk about it from the context of thinking about how we think about it with clients. And this is from my, when I say talking about clients, it's from my personal journey, my experience. I'm not a certified life coach, anything. I'm a guy who's gone through a lot of things. I'm a guy who's had a lot of dysfunction in my life, and God has brought me through it on the other side. I've taken personal responsibility for my journey towards healing and health and wholeness, and whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm not perfect. I'm just committed to growth. And so in that process, that's really out of calling and necessity, how coaching really got started. I've been doing it my whole life, but I started doing it professionally in the last, call it 6 years. And we've just been growing ever since. Now we have a small team, and our team is comprised of everybody. Actually, our entire team has at one point been a client, and they're awesome. It's an amazing group. We've got small group, tight group, but we're committed to helping people live healthier lives, and part of that is relationships. We've got 3 core areas that we really help people with. I said relationships is one, health and wealth are the other 2. And when we think about it in the context of relationships, because that's the topic today, how to have healthy relationships, when we think about it, Adelaide, thank you, we're thinking about how to have healthy relationships, and I would say in the right order. And what that means practically, is we think about relationships in 3 ways. There's God, there's self, and others. God, self, and others. And normally, when people start having their relationships with others become surface level problems, in other words, it starts becoming like a real issue I'm confronted with daily. I'm recognizing there's this disconnect between, me and my wife, or my girlfriend and I, or my, my friends, the close friends, a mentor, a coworker, this or that, the other. When you start seeing your relationships with others cause, I would call it unrest in your heart, or even just like confusion, negativity in your mind, it's one of those things you can't avoid, because it will lead to an unfulfilling life. When your relationships with others are not right, you just can't function well. And so in order to get relationships with others right, the best starting point is actually not even self. We believe the best starting point is your relationship with God. And the first thing to understand in how to have healthy relationships is that you can have a relationship with God. And that's a fundamental starting point I think everybody needs to understand. You can have a relationship with God. And a relationship with God is 2 ways. It's not just one way. A lot of people think about relationship with God as man striving after God. They're trying to spend their life proving their worthiness to God rather than allowing God to show his love to them and receiving that. And so as a result, relationship with God, because of the perspective of that relationship with God, well, it is shown in relationship with ourselves and then relationship with others, right? And so if our perspective of God, if our relationship with God is not healthy, well, then our relationship with ourselves is not going to be healthy, and then our relationship with others is not going to be healthy, right? And I got an amen on that. It's true. It's 100% true, and I can't even begin to get into all the details of how true it is. But just as a starting point, I wanted to give you that perspective. Now, practically, when you want to think about like, well, how to have healthy relationships, let's look at like a really easy way to understand whether you have healthy relationships. Is by understanding what are maybe some signals or signs of unhealthy relationships. And so when you think about what are signals or signs of unhealthy relationships, I'm just reading from Psychology Today. And these are, the article is specifically titled 51 Signs of an Unhealthy Relationship. I think some of these are important. I just wanted to highlight them to you because maybe there's a blind spot. Maybe you've lived your entire life in dysfunction, and so this has seemed normal to you. And a good example we use is like going to the chiropractor. It's like you don't recognize how much out of alignment you are until you leave that chiropractor feeling totally different, totally alive, because something inside of you, whether pressure was released, whether there was an adjustment made that just it changed how you feel. And you walk out of there going, wow, how could I have lived any other way? How could I have lived out of alignment for so long, not even knowing it? And the same is true when it comes to relationships. You start thinking about, wow, like when you actually have healthy relationships, you start asking yourself, how could I have lived for so long in unhealthy relationships, whatever that might look like for you. So a few signs of unhealthy relationships. Not being able to turn to that person, and I'm talking about people closest to you, all right, people closest to you, but not being able to turn to them for emotional support. That's a sign that maybe there's, and especially if you're in an emotionally connected relationship, like for example with your significant other, you ought to be able to turn to them for emotional support before you turn to others. Having somebody who gives you silent treatment, that's not a very healthy relationship. Somebody who doesn't speak life over you, and I'm paraphrasing from this Psychology Today article because I've kind of my own language to it, but somebody who doesn't speak life over you or doesn't really see that you see them for who they truly are, right? And they're always making assumptions about how you see them rather than asking and seeking understanding. Somebody who doesn't respect your boundaries. That's a sign of poor or unhealthy, a poor relationship or an unhealthy relationship. Somebody who doesn't respect, when you say no to something, and let me be the first to tell you, I have been that person who has not respected other people's no. Whether it was in relationships with women or this or that or the other. I mean, I have had like a wild transformation when it comes to thinking about relationships and how to be healthy. And when somebody says no, that's what it is. It's no. No is a complete sentence. Not being able to identify how somebody positively influences you. That's a sign of an unhealthy relationship. Only being able to identify how they negatively influence you, also a sign of unhealthy relationship. And I think a lot of these things, I could go into a number of more details, not having security in that relationship, always walking on eggshells, things like that, somebody being dismissive, also known as gaslighting, dismissing your fear, dismissing things that you find of value. These are all examples. These are all examples of how to recognize when there are signs of poor health in a relationship, just like you would need to be able to recognize signs of poor health in your physical health, right? Well, the same is true in your emotional health when it comes to your relationships, and that spreads over into your mental health and all kinds of other things. But let me just highlight something to you. If you've recognized that some of these things are evident in your life and in your relationships, the first thing you need to do is not point the finger at them. The first thing you need to do is not point the finger at them. Okay? The first thing you need to do is look within you. Because somebody has allowed those things to happen. Somebody has allowed those things to happen. Now, here's the thing. You may have allowed those things to happen unknowingly. Maybe because you grew up with the understanding that that's how things were designed to be, because you were in a dysfunctional family, which, by the way, who's not in a dysfunctional family? We all have some form of dysfunction in our lives. The question is how much, not if. And so if you are that person who is maybe just starting to realize in your awakening, wait a second, maybe some of these relationship dynamics that I have in my life are not necessarily healthy. And here's what I don't like using. I don't like using the language, they're not serving me. The reality is relationships are about serving somebody, and it's not you. Relationships are about serving somebody, and it's not you. Now, yes, you need to be able to take care of yourself, have healthy boundaries, but guess what? Having genuine, real relationship, it comes from a place of overflow. And you can't have that, you can't overflow into somebody else's life in a positive way unless you have that mentality of, you know what, I am here to serve them and honor them and respect them. I'm not talking about manners. I'm talking about a genuine compassion, a genuine love. And this is something that's all misconstrued because of our understanding of what love is, starting with our relationship with God. Many people have the understanding or belief that God's love is conditional. And they've been taught that because they're trying to find their relationship with God through other people's relationship with God. Maybe I need to give money to have love. Maybe I need to give this effort to have love. Maybe being a good person is how I get into heaven. Like that's a conditional kind of love, and not the kind of love that God has for his children. If he's a father in heaven and his creation are his children, that's not the kind of love. If you have a child, that child, when they're born on this earth, they do nothing but poop and pee and cry and all kinds of things. And yet parents somehow have this unconditional love that no matter what, I mean, they're keeping them up at night. There are all these other things. Friends of mine are having children, and it's like, wow. Parents have these children. Children have done nothing to earn that love from their parents. If anything, they're doing the opposite at that point in their life. And yet the parents love them so much. There's no words for it. I mean, that's literally the type of response you'll get from parents. Now, when they just have children, there's just no other love like it. There's just no other love like it. And if that's true of us imperfect humans here on earth, well, then what's true of our Father in heaven? What's true of his love for us as his children? And so that's starting point, okay? And I'm not talking about religion. Okay, religion is man trying to get to God, and relationship is man understanding how much God loves him. And I'm talking about man or woman, right? And relationship is the starting point for us to get healthy in our relationship with God and getting an understanding of how to have a healthy relationship with God, what he truly believes about you. And if you've never asked those questions, starting there is a really good and helpful way to actually get some alignment in your life. Okay? And so when I'm thinking about, some of these signs of unhealthy relationships, the starting point for this whole discussion, this topic for you in your life, is really just kind of looking back and saying, are there signs of poor health in my relationships with others? Rather than going digging for, do I have a healthy relationship with God or not? It's just look around you. Okay, if it's God, self, and others, and your relationship with others is a reflection of your relationship with self, and your relationship with self is a reflection of your relationship with God. Okay, if it's God, self, others, you can tell all you need to know just by looking at your relationship with others. And if you're like me, I, for a long time, was not validating a lot of the difficulty that I had in my life. I just didn't validate it because I was kind of on the one end of the spectrum where I thought, well, I have no right to, because I had privilege in my life or this or that, I have no right to validate pain or to validate problems that I've experienced in my life. And what I've come to find is, I've spent years in counseling. I'm being on the recipient, I've received counseling, like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of counseling. I've received hours and hours and hours of prayer, just been in prayer, inner healing, all these things that were like, before I was my late 20s, I was like, oh, I don't need that, because I didn't need to validate my problems. But what I've discovered through that whole process, and really, frankly, just through like reading the Bible and spending time with God, and having Him speak to me through experiences and people, or even just in my life daily, and seeking Him and inviting Him in. What I've learned is, wow, I needed to recognize how much dysfunction existed in my life before I could actually start becoming healthy and functional in the right ways, in the ways that God's designed us to live. And so bringing your life into alignment really starts with recognizing where it's out of alignment. And that's why I bring up this whole topic or discussion around relationships, and starting with signals or signs of where you might have a lack of health in your relationships. So you don't need to try and rip the Band-Aid off, change everything overnight, fix it all at once. But I would say it is worth evaluating. It is worth considering in your relationships if you have that space, that support, that respect mutually. And if you don't, then thinking about it personally, asking yourself, well, do I give the very thing that I'm expecting? Do I give that very thing I'm expecting? And if the answer is no, well, you know the starting point, and that is to start giving the very thing that you expect. And I would say this, somebody told me, actually my mother-in-law told me this, and she said, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, I'll just kind of leave you with this, because I know people have questions. You got Valentine's Day coming up at the time that I'm recording, and people have questions like, do I stay, do I go in relationships? And we don't need to get all the way into it. But whether it's romantic relationships or whether it's other relationships, as you start recognizing dysfunction, when you're thinking about, well, where do I go from here in a relationship? Well, the first starting point is, of course, you doing what you're expecting from others, you doing that yourself, leading by example. Second is giving them an opportunity or grace for growth in that process, because we're all in the process of growing. And the third is recognizing, and this is what my mother-in-law told me, and it made so much sense to me, if you're making a big decision about your relationships, know whether you're making that decision or whether you have peace that God is kind of giving you the grace to make that decision. Because what we start, we have to finish. And it's not that God can't step in and help us in our process, right? I'll make mistakes, and oh my gosh, God has literally stepped in through people and through other things to help me despite my mistakes. But it's so much easier. It's so much easier when I'm patiently seeking His perspective on any situation, including relationships. Because when I feel like I'm making a decision where I know in my heart, okay, even if I don't have evidence of this in my life, if I know in my heart that He is in it, man, that makes everything so much easier. Because why? I'm surrendered. Meaning I'm surrendered knowing I'm not trying to control everything, including the outcomes. And at the same time, I know that in my heart, I have done the most important thing, which is really invited Him into my life, and that gives me peace no matter what kind of decision I make from there, because I've invited Him into my life, into my decisions, and I've surrendered my decisions. Despite what I think is best, I've surrendered that to Him to say, God, but I yield, I submit to You for what You think is best. And I know that sometimes what I think is best is different than what You think is best, and it's because I can't see everything into the future. It's because I don't have the perspective that You have. It's because of how Your faithfulness works, and it's not the ways that man sees things and man understands. And there's a great verse here in Proverbs that says, there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way to death. And that's extreme, but there's a good example. We get to choose life or choose death in any given situation. And just like I was talking about earlier in terms of signs of poor health in relationships, the idea of, well, I can, if one sign is not speaking life over each other in a relationship. And so being able to choose life is a really important concept. And I believe choosing life is choosing God's way over my way, and understanding first that the character of God is He's a good and perfect Father. So if I'm choosing His way, then it's out of a good intention and nature. And it might not make sense to me in the moment, but I have evidence in my life of His faithfulness over time, and not just in my life, in many others' lives, and even in the Bible it talks about that. And so I can put my faith and trust in Him. Anyway, that's where I'll start us and leave us for this initial discussion about how to have healthy relationships. If you guys are watching on Facebook or Instagram, be sure to, I mentioned earlier, sign up to join our private text community, and you can get messages from me. And then also, I'm going to leave a link for the podcast in my Facebook comments, because we are going to be doing, I'm actually going to have my wife on for this next season, and she's going to be dropping some wisdom nuggets about how she has really seen things grow and evolve and change in our relationship, and she is truly a wealth of wisdom. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys. But I left the link in the Facebook comments. If you guys are watching on IG, you can find that same link for the podcast in my profile. I hope that was helpful for everybody. We'll see you later.